I hope you will support our initiative, and I hope that soon we're going to have our distant participants. And right now I would like to give floor to Iryna, who is the active participant of international and Ukrainian forums and who is ombudsman representative and who has this direct relation to internet governance. And if you can comment on multi-stakeholderism, we'll be very grateful. Welcome. My sphere of work is about information access and, of course, access to information on the internet. Speaking about multi-stakeholderism, so since I am a ombudsman representative, I'm the kind of example of this holderism. If you look at all those principles and definitions that were mentioned, we are a small organization, but we have a lot of authorities, and for us to be effective, have to have this additional resource. And these are public organizations working in different spheres on human rights protection. Of course, we cooperate with them very actively, and there are recommendations and sometimes even first actions and measures to attract attention of the state authorities to the problems, and together with public organizations, attract and involve them. Our state has very different accents, so we have to do something to be accepted somewhere, to integrate into something, and we always have to catch up, and we always owe something to someone. Of course, we have to have standards and comply with standards, and we have to use best practices in any sphere. But it's not the question, it's the question of our choice. If we want to live the way they live there, we have to orient on their practice, on their structures and their rules, because that's how they work and that's the result that they have. But we might not join them if we don't want to. I guess we have to decide this for ourselves. This is about our leap into Euro integration when you were speaking about visa-free travel. Speaking about my practice as ombudsman representative and the internet, of course internet is part of our lives and there's no life without internet. We all have to learn the main rules of its use, and it applies both to legislation and practice of use and practice of application in definite spheres. Internet is the electronic life that we can't live without. Of course, it's important to exchange our thoughts, and forums is this great platform if it's prepared per those rules. Our office supports that initiative, but we cannot be engaged to the organization of these forums, but be participants as representatives. We are always the mediators between the civil society and those organizations. And we sometimes have to take force measures. Well, that depends upon the situation. So we do support the event, but the success of this event depends upon the level of its organization. If these are just a lot of people with different thoughts, that's useless. But I think that there must be this effective result after that kind of event that would give this further platform for conclusions. And all those who have participated in the international forums, they of course have to get engaged. Otherwise, what will be organized is not going to be of good quality. Speaking on the international forums, this is the global movement. I think it usually takes 3 days for the international forum, where they discuss all issues, and sometimes you have to check the words in the dictionary because you cannot understand what they're speaking about. And the phenomena that they're already discussing and fighting with are completely unknown to us. So that phenomenon has already emerged in there, and they have problems with it, and they're already dealing with it, and we don't even know what that phenomenon is. Speaking about access to the internet information, human rights and other spheres, they relate to legislation, practice of administration, and judicial practice. Legislation is a huge sphere on the internet. It's very problematic. Sometimes I hear people say that it's impossible to control or regulate internet. But we have to define what we mean when we say to regulate the internet. Speaking about my sphere, we have a lot of problems with access to information. And as an example, we have no rules that would regulate the posting of the information. If you cannot find information in 3 clicks, it means that it's not there. Another problem is we have no access to the internet as a right that's guaranteed to public information. So if you apply to get information in paper, sometimes you cannot receive it because it's already on the internet. Why do you post information on the site? Is we have to spend human resources and resources technological. Why is it banned to get this access? Because there are no rules for this information to be posted. When I search for information on the sites of state authorities, it's the kind of quest. Find it here or find it there where it's never there. You can call the reception and find out about some usual things that you could easily check on the internet. But you have to address someone because it's not on the internet. So that's why these platforms and forums, they give this push to process of development. So we are about 50 people here. So what can we do? We can do nothing. I think that each participant of this forum have the right to express his opinion, but there must be this kind of push and actions to follow it. Because when we are gathered during the forum for just to communicate and then just leave, it won't do, because some measures must be taken to implement something new. Speaking about things that were already mentioned, that each of us must be able to require some measures taken. But how do we do it? These issues, they must be discussed at forums, and not officials must visit these forums, but the decision makers must attend, who can give some promises when they see a problem, and maybe then it is the only way that it can work. But who's going to come and will the sufficient level will be provided? It depends upon the topic, upon the organization, and so on. So the key principle and the principle of organizing such forums. So human rights, they start with the person, with the human. I don't think it's a know-how. Human rights on the internet. You can speak about realization of human rights on the internet, but also about the internet which pushes human rights and the education itself. This year, in summer, there was presentation of a very interesting study on the state of knowledge concerning human rights in our society, and it was a lot of organizations participated in preparing it to get this high quality, the social studies representative when certain demands are met, like age, gender, lots of criteria have to be taken into account. It was a very global study and it took them a year to prepare it, to have certain results. It's on the internet and you can find it. But the question is, the results and conclusions were very unexpected. The majority of those questioned could not answer affirmatively the question whether or not there are sometimes violations of your rights. They couldn't answer it, the majority. And that means that the state of awareness of the citizens on the basic stuff is absent. But those who confirmed, and when they were asked if they addressed to have protection of their rights, they said they didn't apply. And those who applied, and what they find the effective protective mechanism was the option. So, and there were different options given, like prosecutor's office, the court, but they chose the option which was we addressed the relatives, and the majority chose that one. So they did not apply to any institution that could actually help them. So this tells a lot about the situation of the state and the economics of the country. So you have to understand where you are. What is the level of knowledge? Trust to the government is low. And to expect to have this urge from the society to protect their rights, there is no basis for that. People do not identify their rights. And what can it result in? Well, we all know. So, in case a person knows about his rights, he can go to a lawyer who would protect his rights. But in court, there are not qualified cases, no answers of the judicial authorities. And even if there are cases like that, you know, the judges of Ukraine, they cannot help it either. That's why we have to speak about education, first of all. Think about having legal science at school. Of course, not all of you are to be lawyers, but when you study at school the law, you have to understand that's where it starts. In order to address or go to a lawyer, you have to identify that you have a problem, and the basic knowledge is given at school. And that is going to give you the basis to speak about this, to identify if your rights were violated. I'm not going to mention anything about values, especially democratic values. And values, they are stable, they don't change. And even if they do, and it happens, it can only be due to some big stress. If a grown-up faces some serious problem, then his value can change. But that's what the psychologists say. So the person grows up and gets his or her values being formed ever since he or she is a child. I think it's a great challenge for Ukraine to change these educational approaches, not only concerning the law education. And you know that we have these reforms today, and do they discuss who a lawyer is? Because, you know, we're saying that the lawyer, it's the judge, and it's the legal body. But we have to change the approaches, both in schools and preschool establishments, so that the person at the age of 18 or 19 So we are now speaking about when and how, at what age the pupils will graduate from school. So you know that now we also have these changes brought in the educational system, and I would say that I worked as a lawyer at 18, but today our graduates, the school leavers, they leave school at 18. So I do not think it's a good idea. But the standards do not only have to speak about the amount of years of pupils to go to school. It doesn't mean that if pupils leave school at the age of 18, they're going to be well prepared for life. That's not enough. The state and the authority also can have influence on it, but they have to take into account the opinion of the publicity. How can the society influence the state? Of course, round tables, discussions. But as for me, today we have this effective and huge wave of online education. And that does not depend upon the opinion of the Minister of Education. The enterprises do it, public organizations are responsible for it as well, and they spend their time and resources to organize it. But they know what exactly is required, what kind of knowledge, and that's why online you get this access. I wouldn't say it's all free of charge. What I saw was free of charge, but it's the great independence in the education sphere, and of course it's competitiveness to watch online courses, to watch online programs. And the consumer will do it only if it's interesting and if it's accessible. So that's also the matter of competitiveness, to make this platform for the best ones, for the best enterprises, public organizations. I think it's also a very interesting trend in the sphere of education, and we tried to make some videos on human rights. I don't know if it's possible, but it's a huge deal of work. It's not just to be standing and read something for someone. It's fighting for the consumers, fighting for people being interested in what you teach. It does not depend upon the lecturer or the teacher who comes to the room and gives some kind of lecture. And you know, he just does his lecture. Some lecturer does his lectures in some way, and then the kind of lawyers, you know, those are some lawyers again. Speaking about human rights protection, how much time more do I have? Should I be brief? If in brief, internet is also human rights. I think all of the internet platform is the right. Some place it's fundamental, and someplace it's rights which provide the fundamental rights. I do think there must be rules, and they must be provided to the citizens, and pupils have to be taught to use internet at 7 after they go to school. But it's not even the informatics matter. My child is 7 and she's already using internet. She goes to 3rd grade. On some basic level, she has to understand what to click and what traces to leave or not. So global rules must be initiated. It all starts with the legislation. And again, we come to the question how to govern internet. But we have to speak about preventive mechanisms and positive obligations of the state concerning this or that step of a person and the speed of the information disseminated. It's another huge world where a human being exists. And in the material world that we exist, we need regulations and norms, and we do need them on the internet platform as well. That's in brief. Thank you so much. Well, for not only this speech, but also for your contribution. And we invite you to join us in February. And I hope we have this information resource on the preparation for the forum, and we'll be glad to provide your materials and disseminate your materials during the forum. And I hope to have this constructive cooperation with you. One question. Do you think that today state stakeholder performs the role that he's meant for? Do you speak about some definite authority? I'm very glad that during the last year I heard the concept on stakeholders in Ukraine, but unfortunately it differs much from the one that was given by the work group on internet governance. And of course, internet governance is this single stakeholder. But in Ukraine, we have to list stakeholders, ministries, departments, legislative authorities, executive authorities. I cannot speak about a single body here. Ombudsman, when wants to address some source of information, disseminating this or that information, we noticed that one of the source was disseminating the information on the court procedures, but it doesn't mean that the information that you can find on this site, you can change a little bit and then give it in another format. If the registry requires identification of the information when you want to familiarize with this or that file, they control it. Collecting information led to mass dissemination of some information that you can study without identification. Of course, these are public people, and some information must be provided, and it must be of open access, but there were also some addresses of places of residence, and that's a confidential information, and these are the judges of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine, and that data must be protected in order to avoid some manipulation. So when we speak about judges, of course, the information on the judges mustn't be of free access. And it's not, and when paying attention to changes that must take place in order to discard that information, we have to say that Ombudsman is also the kind of a stakeholder who has this sort of impact on the internet. So does he comply with his part or role? I don't think I can say no, because functions differ. We have to speak about human rights protection on the internet. Does the protection mechanism function properly when they receive claims? It's a difficult question. It's as if you said, do we have courts? We do have courts for someone. Do we have good quality legislation that can serve as a basis? No, there isn't. Do we have educational programs at schools to give ethics of behavior on the internet? No. But at the same time, perhaps at schools, there is a teacher who has a task not just to be in the class and waste his time, but he feels responsible for knowledge he gives. So for these pupils, there is. But on the system level, measures must be taken. Everything starts with the legislation, with the law, in a wide understanding. And they should pay attention to teachers and to the information that must be highlighted. But how? Maybe those could be some faculty groups, but that information must be taken to them. This is not legislation in the classical understanding of the word, but the ministry at least somehow pays attention to it. So then my answer is both yes and no. There is no clear answer, but there is problem. Thank you so much.